Welcome to the Living Truth with Jai Pittman, Uncle Jai, Angie, as Uncle Greg calls me. I've got my sister here who's joining me and sharing some of her most valuable asset, as I believe, in this world, which is her time and her spirit, and she's got a beautiful one at that. And I would like to introduce everybody to join. I'll thank everybody for joining that is live joining us. I'd also like to invite Sister Ange to my circle, my table. I would have invited you to my house, Ange, but can't do that because of the lockdowns here in Sydney. But everybody, I would love if everyone out there can make some noise for my sister. This is Angie. Please make her feel welcome, everyone. There they are, Ange.
Calm down, everyone.
We need to pump it up more. We need to pump this stuff up more. This is all the fans. Let's get it going. I'm still sort of working out the technical stuff. So if anyone's listening, I'm live, and it's my second little run sort of doing it like this. So thank you, Ange, for putting up with my little technical sort of preparation coming through. But
thank you for putting up with all my fans that follow me from everywhere I go.
They are very loud, Angie, very loud, and it's meaningful, Angie. It is very meaningful. Just before we get into sort of our stories, our journeys, and that kind of thing, Angie, I'd just like to quickly ground myself and pay my respects to country, which is what I call I respect and connect the country, pay my respect to country first, and hopefully get a very strong, beautiful connection to country. My name is Jai Pittman. I'm a Dadik, Wiradjuri, Yuin, and Cooma and Yampa man, and I'm always looking to fill up and learn more about my country and my fellow countrymen and women. And I'm a Pittman. I'm a Ryan. Pittman is my mother's name, and Ryan is my father's stepfather's name, and I love all of them equally. And I was born in Blacktown, so I was raised with my family, and that's where I work and share a lot of my spirit. And I'd like to acknowledge the country that I'm on, which is Darik country, which is also connected to one of my great grandparents. And I was born in the Bungadabi clan group of the Dadik Nation, which is in Blacktown. And I'd like to acknowledge all Darik people that have care took for the country where I currently live today. Also like to acknowledge all black fellas that currently live on country, whether it be in Blacktown, whether it be in their own country. Elders past and present for teaching me about country, teaching me about culture, teaching me about life, teaching me about those that have come to this country. I'd also like to acknowledge my grandmother, Yvonne Pittman, again because she's not well at the moment, and I'm caretaking for her while she's sick, and hopefully she can get well very soon and get back to her best. My intention today on this beautiful sunrise is to invite people to the circle to learn some things that they might not be able to get from any other circle, where they might be able to not get an invitation to, I guess is what really is my intention, and to also strengthen my own people with knowledge and sharing and caring and supporting and empowering and helping my own people heal through some of our families' traumas, and hopefully as each generation or each sunrise we can not have to carry these heartaches and pains, and just share the intergenerational magic, and also to be able to welcome our mainstream brothers and sisters to the circle, and to my fire, and be able to have them share their stories so that they can also learn about us and about country, and we can also learn about them. On behalf of my family, I'd like to say Digitigal, thank you.
Thank you. That was beautiful. And I don't know that I could say too much more in terms of just the recognition. Same. Recognition of country. I live in a similar area to you on Darik land, and I really honour the people of this lands, the fact that I've been living in this area now for maybe 20 years or more, and loving this area very, very much. So thank you to an acknowledgement to elders past, present and emerging, and to people like yourself who are still walking the walk and seeking to create healing and love and unison and community. So I really, really appreciate that. I'm very honoured to have been invited onto your podcast today. Thank you so much. And thank you to all those listening with an open heart and an open mind, I hope, to our conversation and parts of my story and my ancestry, which go back to First and Second and probably many other fleets, but in particular First and Second Fleet, multi-generational, right back on my father's side through the Shrimpton line, and Mary Davis Bishop, who was First Fleet, and also Richard Shrimpton, who was Second Fleet and settled out in the Hawkesbury area. And our generations then sort of lived, 3 or 4 generations in that area around Kurrajong. I know after Richard died, because that's how Mary Davis Bishop and Richard Shrimpton connected, is through her daughter Charlotte, and they're buried over in that area. And they owned land, I can't tell you off the top of my mind what time frame, but up around Bowen Mountain, about 30 acres. And if you go there now, there's a park up at Bowen Mountain, which is still part of where that land was, which was recently I went up and paid my respects to country and connect to that place. After they left that place, they went west to Wiradjuri country, which is why I was then born on Wiradjuri country. Very, very proud and have so much deep love for that place, and still go back. My mother lives there, my stepfather. My father is cradled in the arms of the old people at Yagara on Wiradjuri country, which I pay respects to every time I drive out. I just give thanks to the old people for nurturing him and taking care of him. So yeah, we had many generations in the Yagara area farming through my father's father and his father on that land. And so my deep love for the Central West and that country and Wiradjuri country is just, profound. Every time I start, getting closer to, sort of the roads coming through Yagara and Forbes and Parks, which is where I've got an auntie who I'm caring for at the moment. She's the last of my dad's siblings that I care for. And you get out to that country and it's just, you realise that there is a cellular connection to those places when you're born there. And so I pay great respect also to that place of my birth on Wiradjuri country and the people that, elders past and present and emerging out in that area. And there is a good mob out there that are strong and emerging. So it's exciting stuff.
Beautiful, Ange. And I'd like to take everyone back. I'd like to take us back, but and everyone else can follow us. But to the first time that we met, Angie, do you remember?
Yes.
Do you remember?
Yes, is it Blacktown Hospital? Is that where we were?
It was Blacktown Hospital, yep.
Yes. And I was visiting Uncle Greg.
Visiting Uncle Greg. At the time. We got out of this was when Uncle Greg was probably going into one of his second rounds of not being really well, and the man that he's become now after being how sick he was, it's amazing to be able to.
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle, really. We know how sick he was, and I remember we went for a walk. We need to get out of there. Our spirit needed some sunlight, and we just got out of there.
Uncle wanted an ice cream, actually.
Yeah, he as he always does, or a soft drink, or or a Coke, even when he wasn't supposed to have all that stuff, But,
yeah, that's right.
But we went out and got some sunlight. And I remember. We were upstairs first, weren't we? And then we ended up going downstairs. Were you there? I can't remember the whole story, how it all worked, but we ended up going out and sitting out the front of the hospital.
Yes.
And then I heard you sort of talking with Uncle Greg. And And you actually went really, really deep into your stuff. And it really took me by surprise, Angie. It really did.
Yes, I saw the look on your face and I'm thinking, this guy thinks I'm an absolute nut.
I was
Two
really,
things. Is
yeah.
finding this interesting or that I'm an absolute nutter?
But I was blown away, Angie, because
Probably a bit of both.
why I was blown away, sister, is because it was like, and no one really ever sort of does that to me, to be honest with you. Like, I'm always happy to play tennis. I'm happy to play the game, whatever game we're playing. I'll jump in and, I bring my energy and we sort of get involved. But I just stopped for probably a long time and just heard your story. And I seen that it was a bit of a check-in for you and Uncle Greg too, so I sort of respected that too.
Yeah.
But I also heard
course,
you doing a bit of an update with your journey and your walk and where you're at, and that's pretty much that meet and greet there, Angie, has pretty much set us up to where we are, I believe, in the sense of our ancestors, in the sense of brother and sister. That walk the same Mother Earth, and also our intentions on where we're going. And it was, I remember, I just really remember going, wow, it almost was a little bit of a listening. It was like watching a bit of myself, Ange, and my purpose, how I am, but someone else doing it. So someone who's walking of the path that you are, is kind of, it's only your path, Ange, and if you I believe that if you don't do it, it doesn't get given to anybody else, and you know this stuff, and you're talking, and you're checking in with Uncle Greg about it, and we'll we'll get into the deep of we'll get into some of the beautiful stuff, because it's time, like, for this stuff, and I remember there was some stuff that I didn't sort of get to, I didn't get some of the majestic, or is that the right word, or the story-based stuff around, the sword and stuff, and, I was sort of still learning about all that kind of stuff, because I've never really kind of... The symbolisms, and I never really sort of got into that stuff. But one thing that I really, really loved was the fact that you had said in our first meet and greet that I heard you say to Uncle Greg, Sister Ange, was, about not taking responsibility on behalf of your ancestors, but when you then had become aware about learning about what the hell happened here, and you had been having all of these dreams as someone who's not a black fella, that is also someone that is also connected through love and respect to the country and the people and Uncle Greg and our communities, and that you had also had shared some of your dreams growing up about where you're from, and and some of that stuff. I'd love to talk a bit more about that, Ange, if we can.
Sure. And I guess I'd like to say also that meeting at the hospital, at that time it was a little bit scary, because Uncle had been so unwell. I'd seen him at Prince of Wales not that long before, and I was really worried for him. And because we'd been journeying together, and I'll talk about a little bit how that came to play. We'd been journeying with each other for a while, and for the most part, he was the person that I just kept making sure I was doing things proper way. It's like constantly coming back to him and telling him what was happening, and feeling comfortable enough to bare myself to him, often afraid to tell him, oh, I'm dreaming this, or I'm thinking this, or I'm connecting this, or I'm, all of these very European, all this, very, I guess, European or Arthurian legend, and is this okay for me to be seeing this, connecting this, and to think that he might be so unwell. Like, it was terrifying, because you think it's actually not easy to connect with someone on a heart level, at his level, as an uncle and as a respected elder in the community. It's not as easy as it looks, or people may think it might be, to connect. And yet I was gifted that. It literally fell into my lap. And I truly believe we're meant to meet. So part of that was also making sure he was okay, because he had been unwell. But, I want to, make sure that people understand, as I've journeyed, yes, it's been my own dreaming coming from my own bones, but I've always endeavoured to do my very best to check in with Uncle, or it might even sometimes be Uncle Wes. We've had chats too, and I've asked him lots of questions. There has been times where I've sat with Auntie Edna. So I've done my very best, the best that I can do with what I have, to be respectful, as respectful as I can, telling the story that's just happened to me.
We've got a beautiful photo here. Hopefully
you're doing a great job.
Hopefully everyone can see one of the photos here of two very special men in my life, and also very special men, a lot of people's lives in our community. Where was this one taken, Ange?
This was taken in Richmond, actually. A friend of a friend contacted me because they'd heard around the traps that I had a connection to local elders. And, he called me and said, look, I've got a friend who needs certain type of smoking services at their home. Do I know anyone? And of course I called Uncle and Uncle Greg and said, look, what should we do? This is the issue that they're having. And he said, well, immediately we need to call Uncle Wes, because there's protocol around who does what and how it's, it's all that kind of thing. So he felt it would be more respectful to call Uncle Wes. So we all went out together to help these ladies that had a particular issue, and Uncle Wes and Uncle Greg did a beautiful smoking ceremony, well, not so much a ceremony, but a smoking at her house for various reasons that they needed that. And I tell you, we had the most beautiful day out there, and we realised that land that we did that, the house across the street, obviously I won't talk about the address, but the house across the street was one of the first massive houses that were built by a particularly important person, so-called, at that time, important person. So a lot would have gone on in that street in terms of the past and land that needed to be healed or shown some respect and love. So it was interesting. It was a wonderful day, actually. I love Richmond. There's so much energy and beautiful, just beautiful people, and just a slower energy out there. It's beautiful. It's lovely.
I've got some more beautiful photos here, Ange, and I want to say a big thank you for sending them over. But here's another one of...
there's so many. I thought, yes.
That looks like a bit of... When was that one, Ange?
I think we are actually at Mounties. I think we're at I go there with Uncle a lot for lunch and a yarn and a catch up, and we play a bit of Keno and have a laugh and whatnot, and sometimes the raffles. So I think that was at that RSL that Uncle has he's just so devoted to that place and has done so much there for that community.
It's his backyard, eh?
Oh gosh!
Is that you mean the tradies? Is that the tradies? Tradies. Sorry. Yes. Thank you for that correction. It was at Tradies. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think we went there I think it might have been Australia Day. Oh yeah.
I think that day. Yeah, it could have been.
Nice.
Yeah. Many. There's so many pics. I thought, what's some nice ones? So they were.
This one looks like this is a beautiful one, Ange.
Good photos. This one's at Emu Plains. Oh my goodness, that must have been at least 2 years ago, and it was sweltering that day, and there was a big, I'm sure you went there that day. It was Emu Plains, and it was some type of, what was that festival? I can't remember the exact name of it, but Uncle was there. He had paintings with him.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sure you went.
Was it?
Gosh, don't you hate when something's subsiding?
Like the Kui Festival, was it at Emu Plains? No?
Yeah. But it was not this. It was a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were. I'm pretty sure it was. Emu Plains. There was just. Oh gosh, I hate when that happens. It slips out of your mind. But yeah, it was a big festival celebrating culture and mob.
Beautiful. All right. What's the next one I got here?
What do you got else? What else you got there?
Oh, there's another one here, Ange. This one looks like you would have been a bit flash fellas here.
We were flash that night. We were. We all were. You were there, and I must congratulate you on your award. You must remind me and tell everyone about the award that you got that night. That's at Homebush. Is it called Acer Arena now? that what they call it? What do they call it now?
I think it might.
They keep changing its name.
I still call it Stadium Australia. Me, I'm not sure. I think it's home. It's at the Sydney Olympic Park.
Yeah.
So that was just recently.
That's right,
that was only.
So
that's a recent photo.
Yeah, that's right. That was only. Well, it'd have to be a few months now because we've been in lockdown out here in the West for a little while. But yeah, it was just before we went into lockdowns, and it was the Zest Awards.
Yep.
Uncle invited me to accompany him to, and I think that's his friend Kim. I'm pretty sure that's Uncle's friend Kim there. Yep. Please forgive me, Kim, if that's actually not your name. He knows everyone, and so it's very hard to remember all the people that he knows. But he invited me to accompany him to that, and it was really beautiful to see him do the Welcome to Country there, and to see you play Didge for that as well, which was beautiful. And also, yeah, I'd love to hear more about that award that you got and what you're up to with that. But yeah, that was a really great night. It was excellent.
It was a very great night. Very beautiful. We had a massive day, Uncle Greg.
It was.
And I that day, and it was to sort of be there with the beautiful people from that put together the Zest Awards was just an honour to be part of all that stuff, and to get a little bit of recognition is kind of, it sort of feels a bit funny, Ange, when you're in
so
those positions.
Done. And actually, because we have all, yes, that's right. That night I think I cried a few times because I think with everything going on, well, globally, but particularly on a community level and national level, but globally, it was the first time I'd been in a big room of humans like that for probably, I don't know, like a year or 2 years. And having come from the entertainment industry and I've always been very, loved going to events like that and being around people and meeting different people. I realised how much I missed community. And to see the Zest Awards, for people who don't know, is community awards, people who are doing great things out in community. And to see, person after person or group after group step on stage and to hear their story about what they're doing in community was astounding. And I thought, I don't know if that thing was televised, but it should be because there are people doing things inside community that you don't hear it on the news, or you're just drowned in the negative on television. And if people saw what was really happening out there and could see how beautiful and hardworking a lot of people are, I think they would start to feel differently about their communities. But I don't think we're given access to that information. So it was beautiful just to meet people. I met Chris Barth that night.
Yeah, she's cool.
And it was a beautiful night. It really was, just various people coming up, and because they know Uncle, you just get introduced to different people. I'm just so lucky that he'll ring me and say, do you want to come here or do you come there? And you just meet some of the most amazing people. I've been so blessed to be his sidekick at so many different things, and he's been so kind. He's been so kind to me, and it's been a real honour. It really has. Yeah.
It was good. It was beautiful to see you there, Angie.
It was really great to see you.
It was good. Yes, it was good to see you there.
It was great to see you do well too with that group that you're working with.
Yeah, there was another group of beautiful people from Penrith Council that nominated me for a little award. It was a bit of a tricky moment because I'm not really I sort of find it, not that I find it difficult, but it's, to be recognised, I guess, what's the correct way to say it? To be, I don't like to compete with my mob for recognition. I just like to do what I like to do on the ground and be able to, and to be able, it's nice to be recognised and acknowledged, but to win the award for the first time for a little program that I've put together in the Penrith community for council and for some of the other services. It's called it was for the NICE program, the NICE circle that I've created out there, NICE, Nations in Cultural Exchange. Where it's on Darrick country, but it's also about, it's nice. See that feeling, Ange? See, when we say that, that's where this kind of come from, and we want to have a nice ceremony, and it's a really nice circle, and and it's Nations in Cultural Exchange, where it's just always I've sort of been taught that you can't make a circle when you stand alone, Ange, and that's why it's so important to sort of invite beautiful people and to share your journey, Ange, and talk about where we're going on behalf of our ancestors, where some of us might not even have that frequency to go back that far. Where in our culture, it's so important for us to always acknowledge and always pay our respects and to not be greedy. All the things that Uncle Greg talks about in his Welcome to Countries, and always share and to always acknowledge is one of the most important things. And that's what the nice kind of circle was about. And we had some beautiful time spent with some kids and communities, actually identifying where the neighbouring nations are to Darug country, because I've got a bloodline to Darug country, I've got a bloodline to Wiradjuri country, I've got a bloodline to Nyampa country, I've got a bloodline to Yuin country, I've got a bloodline to Kuma country. And so these are all my great-grandparents who give me this. So for me to be able to honour that and bring that in, I wanted to also then teach the kids about Darug country and teach the communities about Darug country. But then I also wanted to acknowledge the neighbouring nations, so that if we walk that way and you keep going 2 sunrises that way, then you're going to run into a Wiradjuri mob. And, and to be able to have symbolism in communities to explain that, has really it was an honour to be part of. So that was a little bit of I had to overcome that. I had to accept that recognition, Ange, with I sort of was almost going to sort of say thanks, but sort of no thanks, Penrith Council. I'm happy to just sort of, not be thrown, just to do my thing, and, and let's keep sort of expanding and doing stuff. But it was also personal growth for me, Ange, to be able to learn how to receive recognition and learn so that was another chat, and I didn't want to disrespect anyone from council and say thanks but no thanks. That's not very nice manners either. So I sort of had to that's just probably a little bit about that story, Angela.
I do understand that, and that willingness to be humble about it and not need the accolades or to be, kind of thing. But one thing I will say, in sitting there and just hearing, I think every single person in every category, like, oh my gosh, there was no competition really. They were all doing equally amazing, different things. And so I would have hated to be the person who had to pick someone to be it would have been horrible to have to make that decision. But at the same time, the beauty of an event like that is that, for someone like me, or probably even people who are being nominated, they're sitting there getting present to, oh my gosh, that's happening in community. Oh, that's happening, and that's happening, and that's happening, and I think that's celebrating people who are pouring more than their money, but their time and their love and their like that investment into the future generations for a more harmonious life, a better life, whatever context that is in. And so it's just celebrating. And I spent a lot of it, as I said, with tears in my eyes, because I was just so moved by people. Just so moved. Like there's so many, like I got to be re-enrolled in people, because in the last 18 months, I don't know about you, but you get online and it's vicious, and you start to lose faith in each other. And, I walked outside my house day before yesterday, and our neighbours, I haven't seen this since I was a kid, because I don't know if you did this, but as kids, we always played in the street. Yeah. And they had created an actual tennis court, like a proper tennis court, because no one's driving down our street. It's like a U street. Yeah. And their family is playing a full-blown game, looked like Wimbledon. And I was like, I'd never met my neighbour. Yeah, right. And I'm like, oh my God, I walked out and suddenly it created this, I was like, oh my God, I so badly want to play. And the fella's like, come play. And I was like, but we'll get in trouble. Yeah. It's like, oh, because we're not allowed to interact with them. And I thought, oh, this is so frustrating, because this beautiful moment. And he was like, and the next day we walk out, they're playing again. I was like, who's reigning champion? He goes, me. It's like you desperately want to go and interact with one another. Yep. But you sort of understand there's this whole thing going on. But it's
the beautiful part. But the beautiful part,
coming
Angie,
back to the point, and again, congratulations for that great work.
Oh, thanks, Angie. It was beautiful to see you
Yes,
there with Uncle
yeah.
Greg. But also, if you were
Pleasure.
the
Yeah.
studio, Ange, if you were here, so for example, if I take this off and put that on, if you were
Yeah.
sitting here, sister, yeah. If you were sitting here when we finished our podcast,
Yeah.
we go out the
Yeah.
front of my place and we got a little basketball hoop, and we have a little round the world competition. I started in our street too, just to bring back that kind of feeling of kind of
Yeah.
community. We
I
can't
know.
because it's kind of everyone's kind of
Yeah.
indoors and online, and it's kind of all that sort of way. But
Yeah.
I would have loved, and even at some stage, Jens, when we have another yarn in the future sometime, I'd love to have another yarn and update and see where you're at with the book, and which is probably a good another little leeway. But we'll have a little shootout, Ange. We'll have a little basketball, little shootout out the front.
I love that.
I've got like 10. There's 10 parties. Some of the kids in the street and the community, and some of the friends and family, they know there's 10 parties you got to go to. You got to get it in before you move to the next one, and then after you get to the 10th one, then you get to go to the after party, Ange. So you can't get a ticket to the after party until you've got them in from all these 10 different places. You've been to the 10 parties before you get the invitation to the VIP Zest Award parties, after parties. See, one of those little yarns, Ange.
So that photo there, that group shot that you just saw come up there, most of the information that's come through in the book is related to the ancestry on my father's side. But what's interesting is that I'm only just coming to understand a little bit more about my mother's side, and a slight aside note is that my mother's, I'll explain this in a minute, my mother's side is connections to the Kennedys.
Yeah.
But this is probably one of the oldest photos I have of my mother's side, just to give presence to that, because I know my father's side of the family has really taken, it's like been a bit in the limelight in the last 3 or 4 years in particular. But I'm just now getting really present to how amazing the line going back through my mum is. So the lady in the middle at the very back, that's my mum's mum.
Yep.
Her name was Esther Annie. She was a Johansson. Yep. Esther Annie Ingeborg Johansson.
Yep.
And my pop, or her husband, Leonard. Hang on a second, I've just got to plug my phone in before it dies.
Yep.
Can't have that. So I love my poppy, and and Sandy, but thank God I didn't get the coal nose. It's like, the coals have a certain, you know what I mean? Like far out, like in some of my cousins, they do have that. But my beautiful pop, he was an amazing musician, and he worked as a fettler on the railway and died quite young, actually.
Yep.
But that's sort of just to get allowing people to get a bit present to my mum's side, and I guess just honouring my mum's side. And so Esther, obviously, her bloodline came through from Sweden. So on mum's side, there's the Swedish side of things, and the story is that her ancestor jumped ship. I'm still yet to get the exact details of dates and how that all happened, but apparently he came in as a shipbuilder.
Yep.
Many, quite a few generations ago, and he was coming here to build ships and then go back, but he jumped ship as they left, and that's how he ended up here. So from that side of things, and then she was a Kennedy on one side of Nan's family. There was a Kennedy.
Yep.
Obviously, it was her father's side of the thing that was Swedish.
Yep.
But there's also connections through her to Russia and those areas. So that's something that I'm just recently getting a little bit more information about. And they were her, in that photo there, it's mostly Pop's family. So his sister beside him and below him, an auntie or a great auntie and their children and whatnot. So that was just, I don't have a terrible lot of information about mum's side, but I'm starting to learn. And the Kennedys that were connected to my nan, a lot of them are buried in Kurrajong, actually.
Okay.
So I'm excited to learn more about them in the coming months, as since I've finished with that part of the story, I can start looking into a bit more of mum's side of the bloodline. So
beautiful.
Yeah. So that's that particular picture there.
See, and the beautiful thing too is
and the Deans. So they were connected. Coles, Deans.
Yep. The beautiful part when you talk about Kennedys and you talk about Wiradjuri country, the beautiful part, Ange, is that I'm actually a Kennedy from Wiradjuri country, which is a non-black fella side who married who married one of my grandmothers, who's a co. And so you never know, Ange. On our white fella side, we could even be related too, sister. So you just... No,
I agree.
You know?
I agree. And a funny aside, I don't personally claim any connection to Indigenous blood, but a funny experience happened to Uncle, I'm talking maybe 12 months ago or more, where a lady came to one of the, like a carer that come to help with him, came to help with him, and she was new. He'd not met her before. And, you know, as Uncle would probably normally do, and he'll, you know, obviously I'll tell the basics of the story. He would tell it better than I would, and it's his story ultimately. But he asked her, he said, oh, he would ask her, are you Aboriginal? And she said, yes, I am. And he said, oh, what country? And she said, oh, Wiradjuri. He said, oh, what's your people's name? And she said, Shrimpton. Now, I tell this story because it's not something that we've been able to know more information about just yet, because the lockdowns have meant that I have not been able to reconnect with that lady. But she married a Maltese, but her family name was Shrimpton. And he said, oh, really? My friend Angie's bloodline is Shrimptons. Where are they from? And she said, oh, all the Parks, Eugowra, all that area. And he said, so what, you like the Shrimptons are connected into mob? And she said, yes. So I haven't nailed that information, and I'm not here to claim that that's true.
Yep.
But it was a very fascinating part of the story. And he rang me and he's like, can you believe this? And so we tried to connect with her at the hospital one day, and she wasn't in. I had a conversation with her on the phone, and she said, yes, it's absolutely true. There are connections, and I've got the family line. We need to meet and talk about it.
Yeah.
But we've not got to that stage. So obviously it's not been time to go down that rabbit hole yet, but it was interesting.
Yeah.
It was very interesting.
But you never know, Angie, with our connection and how sort of fast we sort of moved.
It'll remain to be seen.
It was, you know, there could be a Kennedy bloodline connection in terms of our non-black fella side, because I'm a Kennedy which is from Cowra, and you got a connection and a love for Wiradjuri country. So so I've got another photo here, Angie. There's another photo here. We've already had a look at that one, and there's another photo here. Who's this gentleman, Ange?
Yep. Okay, so this is now I have to get the greats right. So he's my great grandfather. Yep. And his name is George Painter.
Okay.
So he was, he's my grandmother on my father's side's great grandfather. Yeah. Okay. So that's on the, she was a Hickey. So my grandmother, before she married into the Shrimpton line, she was a Hickey. Yep. And prior to that, an Elborn. So the Elborns, the Elborns are very, a lot of Elborns out on Wiradjuri country around that area.
Yep.
But yeah, so my I've got to get it right. So you get the greats. But anyway, my great grandfather is Joseph Elborn, and he married Susanna, who was a Shrimpton, and she's also buried at Eugowra Cemetery.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
They are both buried there.
I talk about, instead of trying to do all the countings of the greats, I just say that's one of my pops and one of my nans.
Yeah, I know.
That's like, Nan, that's Nan, and that's Pop. I look at these
photos and think, gosh. He looked like a real, that's a great mo. Like, wow, what a mustache that is.
I love that one. And then there's also, what about this one, Angie?
Yeah. Okay, so that's my grandmother's mother and her husband. Yeah, and I'm not sure who the lady is in the lighter coloured shade, but that's the woman in the middle is my great grandmother. Yes.
Beautiful.
That's on my dad's side. Yeah, and they would have been out and around the Eugowra area. But actually, my grandmother lived as a young girl in around Leichhardt. Okay. She lived in the city.
Yep.
Before she came out there. So, and she was married before my grandfather. And he was hit by a drunk driver and killed. But she was pregnant. She was married. They only married for a few weeks, and she was pregnant with my auntie Pam. And can you imagine losing your husband and only a couple of weeks into your marriage, but being still pregnant with his child would have been very difficult for her.
Oh wow!
yeah. And in those days, very difficult, you know, to be a widow and have a child. I often think I actually don't know the story of how she then connected to Edward Shrimpton, which was my father's father. So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I've got it. You've sent it. You sent a
But he
couple
took
more
her
across,
on
Angie.
with Auntie Pam, and yeah. Yep,
This one?
let's fire them off. Oh golly gosh. Okay, so this guy. So all right. So these are my great aunt and uncle. So, but he was a Robertson.
Okay.
So she would have been obviously connected into the Shrimpton line, but he was a Robertson, Alexander Robertson. So her name would have been Sarah Shrimpton.
Yep.
And but gosh, they look like hard people, didn't they?
And what time frame? What time
like
frame are we talking on this
gosh.
photo, Ange?
But oh gosh, I'd have
What
to
generation?
double check that. But oh my gosh, you'd have to be talking early 1900s. You'd have to be talking, because I mean, if you think about photographs and stuff like that. So that's great. That's great.
Yep.
So that's three generations back for me. So you're talking early 1900s for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's got there's a bit of history in that photo, Ange.
Yeah, golly, yeah, unbelievable, isn't it? You just think, gosh, these people, you know. So that photo there is when apparently the story is that was when they were coming out to the Yagara area, or they were moving around the Yagara area, and that man with the baby, standing with the baby, was my father's father.
Okay.
Apparently. No, hang on. My father's father's father. That's how.
Your father's grandfather.
So, yes. Yeah. So, and you think, gosh, what it would have taken to travel around, and that's how I guess that's how it would have been done in those days. So it's quite a historical picture, that one, but that's our understanding. I'm not too sure who the other people are. Yep. And as people pass away, as you would know, with, you know, trying to piece together your own family lines and culture, particularly inside of what's happened here, you know, once certain people pass away, that information just dies with them often.
Yep.
So, but yeah, so apparently that's my grandfather's father in that picture holding that little baby. So, yeah. Pretty
and then,
cool old photos, those ones.
Then
sure.
There's this one, Angie.
Yeah, I love this photo. So this was, Uncle came and did, I had an event in the city where we had, I don't know if you've ever heard of this gentleman. Oh my gosh, why is his name just gone out of my mind?
Always the way.
Oh, don't you hate that?
There's no one watching, Ange. There's no one watching. It's just you and me. There's just...
I know. It's terrible. I'll have to put it in the comments after it. Oh, it'll come to me in a minute. Anyway, yeah, so I invited Uncle. There was quite a big event in the city, which he was very excited to come and do, because obviously he's a saltwater man, and that part of, you know, in the city there, that's really important country to him. He's from what I understand, his father and grandfather and people like that were very much in and around that area in the city there, near the water. So yeah, he came to welcome there for me for this big event. And this gentleman, he's American. Oh my God! As soon as I say his name, you'll know who. Anyway, I'll put in the comments if it doesn't pop into my mind as we keep talking. But this guy's quite a famous American educator and health and wellness advocate, and he's right into understanding and respecting country, and really understanding the land and how we can, you know, live more in harmony with it. You know, and nurture ourselves and eat from it and all that kind of thing. His name will come to me. It'll pop into my head any second now.
It's a beautiful, beautiful little photo.
Beautiful event in the city.
Yeah, and it's Uncle just doing what he does best. He loves just sharing the love and rising above is what I like to say.
Yeah. They had a beautiful connection with one another, and yeah. So it's yeah, like you say, it's what best. He addresses a room, and people just really feel the welcome and feel the love, and feel that kindness and genuine connection. So I'm always in awe of his ability to just touch and connect the room. Yeah, so yeah, amazing. That was really, really great. It was a great moment just to hear them talking with each other about various things, and always learning. You know, to sit back and just watch and learn. Just watch and learn.
Yeah, it's been a beautiful journey. I'm not sure actually how. It's kind of we just don't know, do we? Really, about this lockdown stuff and when we're going to get a chance to probably do all of that stuff and get back to that sort of that way. But so I'm just sort of not sure with this the lockdowns and this COVID stuff when we're going to get a chance to get out. And I need the vibrations of the people, Ange, and this is kind of another form of a vibration for me to lead with love and rise above and talk and get connected and I'm sort of and also I'm sort of going through stages now in my own life and trying to sort of look at the weaknesses in my life and whether it's coffee or whether it's food and whether it's just putting some things into place and getting exercise back into my life and being at home with the kids, Ange, has been amazing because it's almost going to be sad in a little bit of a sense for our family, Ange, to sort of go back to whatever the mainstream society normal is going to be next, not what the old normal was. I don't think that's going to happen. It's going to kind of be the next one, which is what it's going to really sort of be. In a way, it's going to be a bit sad because, we actually get to spend time actually, with our own kids, teaching them and helping them. We've had time to sort of learn to read and learn to ride bikes and all the beautiful stuff that we kind of take for granted when we're out there trying to sort of, keep up with the speed limit out there of making money. And I've sort of now just kind of cut back on all that stuff myself now, Ange, to make sure that, my kids kind of, I'm there for my kids now and not just there trying to, play my part at the table on the economy. That too, I'm always here to contribute. But so a little bit sad, Ange, when it all changes and it comes back to whatever it's going to be. But also, it's a beautiful time because it's going to be. We're sort of there's change here, and that's kind of leads me, Angie, into I've got one other photo here that I haven't brought in yet, Angie.
Nice. Nice shot, my friend.
You like that, Angie? For those out there, I might just let me just do a bit on this one, Angie, first. Just have a bit of a drink. Everybody, this is Angie's book. Angie has put together a book that now. I'm not a reader, everybody. For those people out there, I'm not a reader. This is Sister Angie's book. And last night, Angie, I think I read probably about 4 or 5 chapters. And there's no pictures in it. And I still bloody was reading, Angie. What about that? Like I hate reading, Angie. I shouldn't say I hate reading. That's not probably nice. That's not the nice way to say it. But I don't read much. I really don't read too much, to be honest with you. But your book, Angie, I have because of my relationship with you, I've made a commitment to get into it, and there's been some beautiful chapters in there that I'd love to, I'd love for us to talk about, and I'd love to talk about the purpose, Angie, of the book. And they sent me forth, by Angie. How do you say your last name again, sister?
Well, the day-to-day person would say Sciberras, but if you wanted to, the Maltese might say Sciberras. I'm not Maltese. My husband is. But if you want to be, you could, whatever floats your boat. That's fine with me.
But there it is, Angie. I might hand over to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's kind of.
Thank you. So I guess so I thought, something maybe, people are probably wondering like, well, who are you and why are you doing these things? Just a tiny bit about who I am to give people a little bit of a context. So yes, my name is Angela Sciberras. I have been working as a kinesiologist. For those people who may have never been exposed to kinesiology before, it was developed by chiropractors quite a few years ago. And when you go to the chiropractor, most people have been to a chiropractor. They use muscle testing to test for stresses within the nervous system. So my specialty really is working with trauma, and we, as a kinesiologist, we use muscle testing to for me, it's like creating a map. It's like creating like a detective to join dots back of a person's life experiences or things that they're eating or things that they're doing that are causing nervous system stress or trauma in the body. And then once we actually we keep joining these dots back, often we come to a central point or a connecting point for all of these various arms of something that's happened to someone over time. And it's like a house of cards. So it could be, a trauma that happened to them as a child, or it could be something someone said to them when they were in their 20s that just changed the trajectory of their life. It could be something that they're eating on a day-to-day basis, or an injury of some type that changed the trajectory of their life. So as a kinesiologist, that's kind of what I do day in and day out, is just working with people to help them heal trauma and to peel away the layers of various things that are holding them back from having a much lighter, happier, healthier life. And that wasn't necessarily something that I planned on doing. I was a musician and still a musician. I work within the palliative section with harp. I'm trained by a woman named Stella Benson in America to work with people who are passing away and to help via music, sound, texture and harmony to help them do that. So it's almost like all these various connections of myself over time have come together, where it's something that I am, where I move through life connecting dots to try and, release people from trauma or help to create healing of some description. So when it comes to the book, I just want to say that it was not my plan. As a child, I wasn't necessarily into history. Even probably only been the last 5 or so years that I've become particularly interested in history. But it's just something that started to happen to me, and the story unfolded on its own. So I like to preface that, and I also like to say that even whether it's Uncle Greg or even Jai here that I'm chatting to, Uncle Alan Phillips has been an incredible support to me through this journey. Just because they're part of it, I'm not here to say that I'd hate for someone to say, oh, well, just because Uncle's there, he may not totally jive or vibe with every single thing that I say, but certainly I've always made sure that I've shown respect and told him about the things that I've planned to talk about, or things that are happening to me, and he's being respectful to me in the sense of saying, well, that's your dreaming, and that's your journey, and that's your story. So I felt I just wanted to say that as well. So I guess in a way it's almost like various aspects of myself has come to play to have this book happen. And where it really started was this letter. I don't know if people can see that, but this letter was sent to my father in 1996 by a woman named Valda Shrimpton, and it contained inside of it a letter, a handwritten letter by her, and this document, which was basically, it's hard to see on here, but both sides of it. So it's like, this was our family tree from the beginnings of the Shrimpton line and Jane Sparrowville and Mary Davis Bishop, right through from England to the ships to landing here, and then right down to my father. And of course Valda had been researching for what I understood at that time over 20 years. And at that time we didn't have the internet, it wasn't easy to go get onto ancestry.com, so it was hard work to research family lines. And it got to a point where she could do no more apart from she found my father's connection and sent him a letter. And we were all blown away. We had no idea that we had convict ancestry. We had no idea that we had first or second fleet whatsoever. And my father was always really fascinated by that. He loved learning about it. And over time, we started to connect dots around where different members of the family were buried and whatnot. But that certainly still didn't kick me off to do anything necessarily about it. It was just something that unfolded over time. And then I think the next series of things, and that's the difficult thing about the book, is that it's not like it all unfolded in one moment. It's like there's all these timelines that happen, and I'd start to have these really strange dreams, but wouldn't realize until 10 years later what those dreams were about. So it was very difficult, and all came to a head to a degree in the last sort of 12 months or 18 months to 2 years. It all started to come to a head, and even the final pieces of certain parts of the information of the story in the last chapters that you'll get to eventually, Jai, even they didn't fall into place until the day that the old Duke died. And I woke up and knew that there was something more to do before, and it had to be included in the book before it could be released and published. So it's been this constantly moving, multi-dimensional experience for me. And what I can tell you, for those of you eventually, if you decide to read it, every step of the way when something was revealed to me, I had no idea they were connected. I had certain understandings about symbolism around, British symbolism of sovereignty and the myths around Arthur and things like that, but certainly the very, very basics. So for me, this journey has been a revelation, spending 3 or 4 days in tears about it, and then going a lot and following the steps to the next thing, almost like being guided, I suppose, is what I felt that has been happening to me. Does that make sense?
Beautiful, Ange. And it's like, I remember I was doing a bit of reading last night, and it was beautiful because it's part of my retraining in my brain, and no phones in the rooms, no phone before bed, no TVs, no lights on. And I've always done this my whole life. But last night, Ange, I want to share with you, I invited your book and your spirit into my bedroom to read, which is something that I've never freaking done, Ange, ever. Like, I've done it a few times growing up. So I read 5 or 6 chapters of it, and it was great motivation to know that we're going to talk about it today. But it's kind of confirms a lot of stuff that I already sort of feel and know about you too, Ange, and I sort of know from the deep conversations that we've always had about the journey that you're on and what that sort of looks like, and then who you need to come into contact with. Why I say that is because I know my journey as a black fella, and also a white fella with my white fella lines too, that I know all of my white fella stuff too now. And I love it all equally the same now. I know that there's right and wrongs that have happened, and now it's time to sort of look at how do we right some of the wrongs that have happened, even if it is from some of our white fella ancestors or some of our best friends' ancestors that we know and grown up with, and even if it's beautiful people like yourself or even ScoMo's ancestors, because ScoMo's ancestors, they're also buried out here, where one of the chapters that I read, Angie, was chapter 11, which was the unspoken agreement, Angie. Which is something for me that, if I could probably talk a little bit about it to sort of let people know what that sort of means, is the unspoken agreement in what I understand it, but I'd love to then for you to explain it too, Ange. But the unspoken agreement, everyone, is a time here in our country where horrific things happened to my ancestors and to my family and to my people. And it was done by settlers, and it was done by convicts, or it was done by not our own people. And there was laws that were put into place to stop it from happening.
That's right.
And then,
I think that's very important. That blew me away, actually. I thought it's interesting to understand all of that around the fact that the Crown was at that time trying to protect Aboriginal people. But go on. Yeah, go on.
And then some of the most horrific stuff that has happened, which is also kind of, it's good to look at all the facts when we sort of make decisions about how are we going to walk forward with some of this stuff, is that some of the most horrific stuff that happened has happened from just the general common man that's living with his family, that actually with other common men in the community had this unspoken agreement that it was going to continue to keep happening. But fucking no one was going to talk about it, Ange. It was a secret. It was stuff that no one was going to talk about. And the beautiful thing that I love about our connection, Angie, is that we are looking at, we're making ourselves available on behalf of our ancestors. We might not have the answers on how to fix it right now, but how do we do that as a black fella, me, and a white fella, you, Ange? How do we, on behalf of our ancestors, come together? How do I, as a black fella and a white fella, have that come together and heal through that process? How do we have, I've always sort of said that, the English stuff, I've done all my black fella stuff. The countries where I'm from, the country knows me. My bloodlines know me, my first direct bloodlines, and I've gone to pay my respects back to country and slept where my old people were born and where they hunted and gathered. And I haven't. The only part I haven't done yet is for my only grandmother that is alive out of any of my mother, father, and grandmother's generation is my nan Yvonne, and her line back to Steeple Bumpstead in Essex in England, and that's her line. I was going there in 2020, Ange, and just to complete all of my circle, I wanted to just to be able to go back there, and I had a bit of a dream that it's funny, Ange, because. One thing that stands out for me was I was going back there to walk that walk of my I'm not the man I am today without my grandmother raising me, and looking after all of my family, and they're all black fellas, and she's the only one in the family that's not a black fella blood-wise, but she's been she's grown with us. She's part of us, and that's what she's never ever identified to be a black fella. Everyone thought she was a black fella. Even Uncle Greg says, no, she's a black fella. I don't care. You can tell me whatever you want. She's a black. I said, she's not a black fella. She's my, and I'm the only one that ever talks about this in our family. I'm the only one, and why? Because it's the truth for me now. I do want to go and I do need to go and walk where her grandmothers and grandfathers have come from too. So, but to be able to go back there, Ange, and to be able to pay my respects and to be able to fulfill that another part of me is something that I need to do. But it's also going to then motivate a greater purpose, Ange, of what does it look like when one of my ancestors, potentially from over there, had fucking did some horrific things to some of my other ancestors where we currently live now. Right. And there's been no...
What an internal dialogue.
Yeah, and it took me 38 years to work this out, Ange. It took me 38 years to sort of work this out. And I'm not saying that I have the answers, but I definitely have some solutions. And one of the big solutions, Ange, I'd love to share it, is it's time for this stuff, Ange. I know where you're going with your stuff, and the beautiful thing that you're doing on behalf of your ancestors and some of the horrific things that had happened from maybe some of your ancestors to my black ancestors.
That's right.
How do we get to a point where, what does that look like when we get to a stage of being healed from these intergenerational stuff, these traumas that we don't know that are there, that are motivating our day-to-day interactions and our day-to-day growth and happiness. And for me, I was going to go 2020, I was going back there, Ange. I've told this story a few times that I was going back there, and I was going to, I was going to organise through some friends of a friends that were mates with Harry and stuff, who's left the pole position there of the palace. And to say, brother, let's go and have a cuppa, and also look at, sharing the love around one of my bloodlines that come back here. And I'm glad to come back on the country, you could speak blackfella way and pay my respects and walk where my ancestors have walked. But also, it might be time to go and have a cup of English breakfast tea with Nan too. And, Queen Elizabeth.
That would be good.
And talk about, how honoured I am to be able to come back here, but also talk about, well, we might now need to have a look at what sort of happened to my other ancestors when some of our ancestors went over here, and they've left a massive kind of mess now, and it might be time for us to, get another set of keys cut for our people over here. So we're not going through the back door no more, Ange. We need to fix this, and what does that look like? And that's that's the beautiful part, Ange, that I loved about our connection, was you getting woken up in dreams, Ange, and seeing things that happen where your ancestors are from, and you've seen this stuff. And I'd love for you to share as much as you're happy to talk about with that stuff. But that's one of the major beautiful things, Ange, that I see with our connection, sister, is this ability to have the knowledge about our ancestors and where our people come from, in our hearts to know the difference between right and wrong, and then, for example, this yarn have the strength in our bellies and have the fire in our bellies to be able to say, well, it's fucking time now. It's time for us to join at the fire, join the circle, and sit down and talk about what does it look like on behalf of a today walk, so that we don't necessarily keep passing on these traumas. But I'll probably, you speak about this best, Ange.
No, I love what you just said, because that was, if I some people might think it's a little bit odd or strange or nutty how I've experienced this, but I truly believe that I've experienced almost like a message through my ancestry. And the clearest part of the message that I got, I woke up one night and it was like this really clear, almost like a voice in my head, and it was the words saying, "It is time to pass on the pain of the past to our children's children no more." So, you know, it is time. And like you've said, I have no idea what that looks like, but I've experienced a story where I've got one tiny aspect of the greater web of what that would look like or what it would possibly take to do that. Because I believe that there is a spiritual realm. I believe that the old people exist and still walk this country as they have for thousands of years, and that there are certain parts of country or certain parts of ancestry that there's an open book. It's like when I work with people in kinesiology, the reason why they're still they're being triggered or traumatized by their past experiences or even their parents' past experiences is there's an open file that's got like, if you think about like a computer that's got like some type of, it's been, sort of damaged in some way and the file won't close up properly. You can always go back to a file and look at it, but it's bugging or it's creating some type of trigger or a bug in the current sort of program. And for me, I've always had experience of being able to see, I don't know, I could say the word spirit maybe, or see symbolism or see something even from the time I was a child. As a child, it was something that I think scared me more than inspired me, but I often saw things. And where it really heated up for me, and I didn't realize this connection to this story until 10 years after it was happening, is that I stepped foot for the first time on country that's out and around the area where the Battle of Richmond Hill happened, around Richmond, so North Richmond. Some people may know about that battle. They may know what happened out there in the Hawkesbury. And it was, if not it may have been the first commissioned slaughter, which was commissioned by Macquarie, Governor Macquarie at that time, to literally the whole way along the Nepean. There were areas even right up into places near Picton and things like that. But in particular for, I guess, my ancestry, they would have been settling in that area at that time. Now, there is no indication that they took part. There's also I don't know. I'm not here to say that that's the case, but certainly the minute I stepped onto that area, and I didn't connect this back until years later, I started to have, and I'm talking not every night, but maybe 3 or 4 nights a week, dreams with my eyes open. And not like I would sit bolt upright with my eyes open and I would see something unfolding in front of me that would eventually, within maybe 30 seconds or a minute, peel away like paint. If you imagine someone like slopped a bunch of wet paint on a wall, it would then move back down and I'd eventually be in my bedroom. But for 30 seconds to a minute, I'd be in this space. And the thing that I would see over and over and over again for maybe 10 years was black people hanging from trees. And like it was like, some people might find this a little bit like horrible, but I would see dismembered bodies, but I would mostly see black people hanging from trees. But it took me a very long, I had no idea why, because at that stage of my life when those dreams happened, I had no connection to any of this whatsoever. Yes, I knew about, but I didn't know my ancestors lived out that way. I didn't know the connections, none of it. I was completely oblivious. And it wasn't until all of this started to unfold, by that stage I'd connected with Uncle Greg. Parts of the journey began to unravel where we realised that my ancestors were buried, or the Shrimpton side, Richard buried at Wilberforce Cemetery, which is out in the Hawkesbury, and started to look at, basically he didn't have a headstone. That's where it all kind of started. And I thought, oh, well, you know, for the generations, it'd be nice to have this second fleet ancestor have a headstone. So we started to look at what that would take, talking to council. The councillor at that time, when we met over on that at that cemetery to talk about how this would work or not work, never met him before in my life. We were literally just standing on country, talking about it all, and he said to me, "What was your ancestor's name again?" I said, "Oh, Richard Shrimpton." And he went, you know, he was shocked, visibly shocked. And he said, "Do you know what I've been doing for the last 5 years?" And I said, "No idea." You know, I didn't know him from a bar or so. He said, "Angela, my portfolio is parks, cemeteries, and those kinds of memorials and things like that. That's what I do." And he said, "I've spent the last 5 years starting and completing the Richard Shrimpton Memorial Walk which is in around Epping, because he lived there just before coming to the Hawkesbury. And there's a creek there named after him." He said, "I've just completed it." He said, "I've thought about Richard Shrimpton every day for the last 5 years, just completed it, and I've now come here, and you're telling me his great granddaughter is now saying, now you got to do this?" And I was as blown away as he was. I mean, what are the chances that would happen? And suddenly all the red tape started to fall away, and conversation around the fact that, you know, there were over 400 unmarked graves, including Aboriginal people. There's a woman named Elizabeth, that Aboriginal woman who's buried there, is unmarked. I had people ringing me out of the blue. I don't know how they found out what I was trying to do, going, my ancestor. And then we thought, well, maybe we just do something like a stone circle, or I kept seeing stone circles to honour everybody. And then the last thing that the councillor said to me as we're chatting about it all is, "Oh, by the way, you need to connect with the elders of the area." You know what I mean? Like, if we're starting to look at this kind of thing in a bigger scale, you need to connect with an elder. I thought, oh, you know, okay. And it would have been 48 hours later, I was invited last minute by a friend to go and help run a raffle at, I think it was St Mary's RSL or something like that.
Yeah.
And I didn't even have time for it, but she was like, "Oh, I really need some help." She was doing something beautiful in the community. So I said, "Okay, fine, I'll come." I came, I finished. I was literally about to get back in the car and go home, because I was leading a course at the time, coaching people. And she said, wait, I just need you to meet someone before you go. And she took me around the corner, and here's this little man sitting there with an Akuba with "Proud and Deadly,"
The one and only,
on the cap. And the one and only, and I'm literally 48 hours before going, how am I going to find an elder? How do I do that? And I'm sitting there, okay, of course there's an elder sitting here after I've just finished running a chicken raffle. Okay, fine. So I sat with him, talked with him a little bit about, and at that stage it was really small. I was like, oh, you know, this is who I am. And I must admit, early days there was a real uncomfort around sitting with an elder or Aboriginal original person saying, oh, this is who I am, and I'm basically as you know, white as it gets in this country. This is what I'm thinking about doing. And he just turned to me and said, can you give me a lift home? And the rest is when I'm driving. You think about it, 48 hours early, I'm told I need an elder.
Yep.
As someone to work with on the project and make sure things are being done proper way. And I'm driving down the street, and I'm literally looking to my left thinking, am I dreaming that I now have an elder in my car? Like, how does that even happen?
Yeah.
So to me, it was like, you know, that kind of thing. So that all unfolded. And as we started to work on the possibility of that, we met on that country with a lot of other convict ancestry of that cemetery. Yep. And we talked about the possibility of creating something, a peaceful co-creation out there. We also spoke to Auntie Edna about it and told her what we're planning, and she seemed, you know, quite happy as long as it was within certain, you know, this. So it got to that point, and then it got bigger and bigger. The story got bigger and there was more to it. But coming back to the dreams, you imagine this had gone on and on and on. I'd been dreaming these things since, I'm talking 10 years prior, and one day my husband and I were having a coffee in Currajong, and it just occurred to me, I wonder if there are any slaughters out here. I don't know why, because I'm always my mind is always why. Why is that connecting? Why has that come up? Like, what's that connected to? And I Googled it, and of course, up come Richmond Hill. And I drove down, and of course, the crazy irony is that memorial, there's a memorial at the back of St. John of God Hospital. And a lot of people wouldn't even know it was there unless you went looking for it. And here it was. And so we go there, I find this place, and the sign that explained what happened. So I'm standing on this ridge looking out over this country, which is basically, I won't say exactly where I was when I first stepped on country, but it was basically that country, right? I'm looking over the area that 10 years prior I'd first went to when this all started. And I'm reading the sign that talked about what happened up there, and word for word was what I'd been dreaming for 10 years.
Wow.
Word for word. And as I've done, I can't tell you how many times I've cried through this process. I stood there and cried because I realized that, you know, we can think, oh, it's just about doing this thing or doing a nice monument, but it's bigger.
Yeah.
And you start to become overwhelmed with what are we doing here, really? And the realization that there's something coming through me, whether it's ancestry, something wants to be heard. Something needs to be resolved, and the pieces just kept falling into the place.
Yeah.
And I realized, and as soon as I had that realization that I'd been seeing what happened there all those years ago, they stopped. And that's what happened. So they stopped. I stopped having these visions, right? And it wasn't too long after that we were standing on this particular area out near Wilberforce, which I wanted to say very quickly, if you don't know who Wilberforce was, there's a blueprint of incredible importance around the whole journey. And the blueprint is that my ancestor and others, including one person involved in the Mile Creek Massacre, which is what you were referring to before, which was the chapter of the unspoken agreement. He is smack bang in the middle of that cemetery. One of the only people who walked away from that. There were 3 or 4. He came back to the Hawkesbury a hero. That was the thinking at that time. So here he is in the middle of that. You've got that energy connecting in there. You've got William Wilberforce, which is what the cemetery or the area of Wilberforce is named after, was probably he restored my faith in the concept of my British ancestry, because I realised that he was the person that spent his whole life working towards the abolishment of the slave trade and slavery in its entirety across the Commonwealth. Before Abraham Lincoln, before America, but he was the guy. He was a very ill man. He was he was well-to-do. He had a lot of money, but he devoted his life and all of his energy to fighting that scourge. And his best friend and person who encouraged him to do that, because he was in politics, and he just felt a drive towards stopping this thing that was happening. But can you imagine at that time in the world where slavery was one of the most lucrative, and still is, can I say, there's more slaves on this planet now than there was then. But it was extremely lucrative, in particular to the Crown and to a lot of aristocrats and people across the world, and also to people in some of the native countries who were also involved as a part of the trade. It wasn't just white fellas who were making money off the people. It was also people in their own countries making, you know what I mean? There was cogs in the wheel that were of their people. So his best friend, John Newton, had generational slave ships, and John Newton had a shipwreck on an island. I can't remember exactly where it was, but the native people healed him. He would have died, and he had an epiphany, and it was just like, I cannot do this any longer, and he became a clergyman. Now, John Newton, what's important about him is he wrote the greatest spiritual song that's ever been written, Amazing Grace.
Yep.
And when you hear that now, knowing that he was a slave ship owner and then got behind William Wilberforce to abolish the slave trade and slavery in its entirety across the Commonwealth as it was then. And 3 days before William Wilberforce died, he got a letter to say that it had been passed in the Commons and that slavery was abolished. Like, you can't imagine. Can you imagine? He spent his whole life trying to do that. So I say that because, you know, as much as it's rightly so direct land, the label that's been placed upon it, if it can lift the purposes of what we're doing and inspire white fellas, all fellas, you know, the Rainbow Nation, all of us, to see that, you know, miraculous, amazing things can be done, then I love that. And so at that time, council said, well, you know, this land here, that's the cemetery and whatnot, if you're wanting to place some type of memorial, and circle, whatnot, it's Crown land. And this is where what you're talking about, Harry, and the Crown.
Yep.
The minute the council said you need to go, because there's Crown land, and, you know, so I went home and I just was like, I need to write the Queen.
Yep.
And I had no idea why I needed to write the Queen, but I thought I need to write the Queen. So I wrote the Queen, and she wrote me back.
Yep.
And
you sent me those letters, eh? You showed me those letters.
Yeah.
I should have had them ready to bring up to show people, but that could be another yarn where we
they
go.
They are inside
they're in the book?
all the letters, and the final letter is it's a doozy.
I actually read a bit of that one too, actually, funny enough, because, you know, I'm not a speed reader, but I do remember you actually put together a lot in that last chapter about your story. So, and did she get back to that letter that you wrote, that big?
Not yet.
Oh, she hasn't got back to. Okay.
Not yet. And they may not, because that was a huge.
That's a big one. That's a personalised one.
It's a big one, and I.
There's some stuff in that one there. It's coming back to me now.
Yeah.
That it's almost like I sort of, when I was reading your letter and how you wrote it to her, whatever the correct English is. It's almost like it could have come from Harry. It could have come from one of her own family members that are saying, we have done some fucked up things. We need to fix what we broke. We need to fix what we've broken now. Not just in Australia, but in the Pacific, really. Also, there's a lot of other places where. And if I could just jump in and have a bit of a turn for a quick minute, Ange, I wanted to share this with you because it's kind of important to me now. Like, a long time ago, it was about black and white, Angie. It was all about black and white. And there were some good people that were working for the government back then that was also trying to help black fellas at a time when things were horrific for us. But there was a lot of people that were government, that was the average Joe, that was just that had that code of silence and was still doing things. But for me, Ange, if I could probably just share with you now, and that's why it's so beautiful, and I really wanted to do our stuff and get connected on our and represent our sides of the fence and sit down and have the tough conversations and be present on behalf of our ancestors. And I mean all of my black and white too, but more so where where there's wrong being done to some of mine. And the wrong that has been done to some of mine it sort of makes me think about, Ange, that now where we are in our generation, and people like yourself, sister, and other beautiful mainstream Australians or mainstream people around the world, it's kind of gone. I shouldn't say it's gone from black and white, but it has kind of evolved now for me, that I want to sort of share in our yarn, is now it's kind of not about black and white no more. Back then it was, because if you were black, white fellas did that to you, you know. Where now there's laws that kind of not allow, like I never shared this, Ange, but I want to share it with you too. I've had dreams also, Ange, not in my house now, but in my last house, where I have my dream with my family and my beautiful fiancée Caroline, and paying the bills and doing all these things that I never ever thought I would have been able to do, you know, to be honest with you, and living in a nice suburb and new suburbs and new homes, and just just doing the men stuff that, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to be man enough to do all that stuff, and I'm living that dream now, which is beautiful. But one dream that I had, Ange, I had one dream, and it wasn't even a dream. It was real, man. I got to tell you, it was sort of real. And I had the feeling, no, first I heard the noises of something coming up the street at, in the night. Everyone was asleep. And the noise that I heard, it was like a clock, like a like horse feet. It was the feeling that I got, Ange. The feeling that I got really traumatized me.
Yeah.
And here I am with our kids get out of bed and get into bed with us like most families do, and we've got to take them back, but most time we just leave them there now. But this one time I woke up crying, and I woke up like scared, and I woke up like a warrior. I woke up prepared to die, it almost felt like, because I got the feeling of what it would have, no, not what it would have, no, that's not right, I can't say it like that. I had been given a feeling of what it may have felt like sleeping with your mob and then having strangers come into camp and knowing what's been happening with other mobs, sending messages about the other mob and who's here and what's going on. I had that. I got given that feeling, Ange, to be able
it would have been, yeah.
It was a relation. It was like I needed to know this feeling so that it really helps me as much as I can from how far many generations we are away from these things happening, to be able to have a relation point of what freaking really happened, Ange, and what may have been felt. Just like I never got to see anything, I never got to do it. Just that feeling of someone coming, Ange, and knowing what's going to happen, and you're powerless over it. For me, was this dream that I woke up in, Ange, as a black fella, crying, and I woke up wild, and I woke up ready to die, Ange, to protect my family. I was walking around the house, out the front. I was walking around everywhere, you know what I mean? And I was like, and I've got my own little stick that I got at home, as all black fellas do. We got little stick. I call it Justin. That's Justin. That's just in case I need him, see? So we go around, and black fellas, we've got Bundy sticks. That's my Bundy. I call him Justin. That's just in case. Anyway, but I remember just that feeling, Ange, was a time for me to really be able to, not even same but different, not even same at all, but just a point to be able to go, have you felt this before? No. Well, you need to know that this is kind of stuff that's happened where you're sleeping now, Jai.
Yeah.
This is happening where you are with your family now, Jai. This has happened here. And to relate to that feeling, Ange, for me was, well, not to relate because it's not even same, but just to be able to have the freaking experience was a massive one, Ange. And so that's just one quick story on that. But there's like, the other beautiful part, Ange, is about, for us to be able to come together and talk like this on behalf of our ancestors is not on behalf, we're not speaking on behalf of ancestors at all, but just to be able to have these conversations, and it's so beautiful. That's why I wanted to invite you into my life, Ange, and spend time with you and grow with you and have the tough conversations. And we've had our little moments, we've had our little moments too, and then we've reconciled and we've sort of worked through stuff, and here we are again, Ange. And I believe that these are all elements of our relationship that is really going to help us as individuals and help us also as black and white black and white fellas, that helps us as Australians who are sharing this country together now, be able to maybe lead our own families first, and then be able to then, for mainstream Australians and new Australians that are coming here to hear your story, Ange, where some people might not even know any of this stuff existed, Ange. Some people don't even know this is the life. People are here for the lifestyle now, Ange, and don't necessarily and then they see black fellas struggling and not buying houses and not looking after this, or there's drug problems, alcohol problems and incarceration rates, and have no idea about what's gone down here, and know that we are only like 3 to 4 maybe maybe 5 generations away in some towns where this happened.
Yes.
On the same land where people are walking, Ange, and they're paying their rates and they're buying their houses, and on the same places where they're sleeping.
It's and probably I can understand anyone listening to this and thinking, oh wow, like it's very hard to understand, thinking what is the book exactly, or what is this journey, and to be very honest, to try and explain it would be another 3 or 4 hour podcast. But I really invite people to read it. I would love for people to read it, because the feedback I'm starting to get a lot of really great feedback through. And you'll notice on the front of the cover it says the greatest Australian never told, and people might think that's a really arsey thing to say. But I don't believe
the greatest Australian story never told.
Never told, yeah. I don't believe my story is not the greatest story. I'm sure there are much better stories. The greatest Australian story never told is the story that will come, I hope that will come from the seed. The book is like, I just see it like a seed, but in each seed is the hologram and the blueprint for a huge oak tree or gum tree or whatever. So it's certainly not the magnificent 200-year-old gum tree in its glory, but it's just a seed that hopefully will be planted into somebody's heart on either side of the fence of the conversation, so that, we can gain understanding. And I think it's in gaining understanding of one another that we can start to connect again and understand. So it's, I'm not here, through the book, I do talk about aspects of things that happen here. I talk about my own grief about reading a book called Blood on the Wattle by Bruce Elder, and he goes through many of the untold massacres that happened here. And I spent 2 or 3 days reading that book and 2 or 3 days crying, and in the realization that as much as people talk about the Crown as an entity, which obviously was like a spearhead to what happened here, also it's like this multi-dimensional experience where my own ancestor, who, Mary Davis, was 21 years old, how she survived those ships. There's atrocities on so many levels for even those people. You think about the Irish orphaned women who were sent here, after the early ships. There were the ships of Irish orphaned women who were sent here because there weren't enough women for the men. And so there's all these different levels of trauma on so many scales. And even the conversation about that first commission slaughter I spoke of that happened along the Hawkesbury here with Macquarie. In reading his story, there's quite a huge book about his life. I got to learn that he was Scottish, and his people were Highlanders, and in Scotland, and there's aspects where he speaks about in some of his journals of his experience of being a very, very young child, and how at that time, Prince, oh gosh, I can't think of his name at that time, but anyway, obviously at that time the Brits were coming in and trying to take apart Scotland and the Highlanders and all that kind of thing. And he said it was very normal to be going along the road in a horse and cart and seeing spikes with people's heads on it, or people being boiled alive, or people hung in trees to warn, all this kind of thing, very normalised. But it was happening to his own people, to the Scottish Highlander people, who were at that stage they were the native people of that place, and to think that somewhere along the line he went from being a part of the atrocity to becoming a redcoat, to becoming not only a redcoat but a general, and then actually committing the same atrocity on the people here that happened to his own people. And so you just think trauma is such a really, like I often think, you see in families where there's an alcoholic grandfather and there'll be 10 sons and maybe half the sons take up drinking and beating their wives, and there's 2 or 3 that don't. or the atrocity keeps flipping and changing. You think to yourself, it's just so bizarre that you would think a man of, is it like, well, if you can't beat them, join them? I don't know. Like, what is that?
So for me, Ange, like, just to sort of finish up what I was saying on my other yarn there about that little dream that I had, the thing that it's just come back to me now that I wanted to sort of share with you, which is kind of beautiful. Back then it was about black and white, and that kind of gave us our positionings, and we couldn't change that. It was obvious that we knew which teams we were on then, and we are where we're at today. And now I talk about, Ange, I really talk about now. It's a bit of a statement for me that I live by now, because, it's not about black and white now. It's about wrong and right now.
That's right. That's well said. And I love that you say that. And some people, I know that we're going through this polarization at the moment where, in some ways, thankfully, like a lot of information and understanding and knowledge about the whole black-white dichotomy. And it's almost like the scales are almost tipping a little to the other side, whereby people with white skin are now being really hammered. And in some ways, I can understand that, the way life works is often it's like a pendulum. So the pendulum was swinging a certain particular direction for a really long time, which made life very, very difficult for people of colour, Aboriginal, original people, Native people. But it's not to say that, and not in defence or to take away any of the pain that happened to those people, but there were also huge amounts of people of all skin types that were also going through, whether it be in Asia, like huge atrocities, Germany, like of people creating atrocities against each other.
Yep.
And to me, it's like the thing that I see is that it's not even black-white. It's like this human condition that we can't possibly survive without persecuting somebody.
Yep.
It's like we have this thing, and I'm noticing, even some may really think this is, they're welcome to think whatever they do, but even I'm noticing online at the moment, it's getting to the point where obviously it's not that I think it ever was cool, but it's not cool to be racist anymore, or speak about same-sex people or whatever it is. Not wanting to get too political about it all. It's becoming very uncool to do that, which is fantastic. That's exactly how it should be. But it's almost like then the human condition can't quite handle not having someone to persecute. And what I'm noticing, the new narrative that's coming out is this whole, people who have decided to have the jab or not have the jab. So it's interesting how people, I know this is going off, I won't go any further with that, but it just, to me, I think the thing that I really look forward to is when we can move through and heal everything, like you're saying, like we do need to look at the ugly things without doubt. Yeah. Like, unless the stories are told and heard in their truth and their wholeness as best we can, without the people feeling like they've been heard and understood, and on both sides of the fence going, wow, like I can really understand what you've been through now this is why we're going to change things for future generations and heal the past. But at the same time, it's also noticing that humanity, there's something about us that if they're blue-eyed, it's like we find something different about people, and we create division. Yeah. And the thing that I pray is that with everything going on right now, that we hold together and not divide, because not let that overriding dysfunction in humanity where we just continually want to divide and conquer. What is that?
Yeah, I sort of I talk, Angie, I sort of talk about, for me, like what I was talking about earlier about like this COVID stuff that's here, for me has sort of, the positive that has come from this COVID is, that I get to actually I'm forced to spend time with my kids. I'm not forced to be out there
amazing.
I'm not forced to be out there trying to run on an old software program of mine, which is trying to fit into the economy and trying to make as much money and keep up with the speed limit as some of the other people who've been successful. Well, I'm at a stage where, and it's a bit like, I sort of say it a lot now, and any of my yarns that I have, I've sort of said to Caroline, my beautiful fiance and my baby mama, that, what do we need to live now? How much? What does it cost for us?
Exactly.
What does it cost for us to live now?
Yeah.
And I said that, because I'm only going to be aiming for that year to go out and pay the bills, because anything else other than that culturally is kind of greed, Angie. If we're right. And what's that at the expense of? Well, I'm actually out there I'm out there being taken away from my family, trying to make more money that I don't need. It's like Uncle Greg talks about conservation, and us being conservationists and making sure we don't take more than we need, and to keep strengthening and leave some there for tomorrow and for other mob, and not taking all the kangaroos because we see 5, because that mob's going up the road going to need a feed too. And having these sort of yarn, and this is the... I remember another yarn, Uncle Greg and I went and did a couple of yarns together for the climate change mob, and those that are passionate about that. And, climate change, I sort of shared that it's kind of, climate change to me kind of really means time it changed. And what time it change means is the relationship to everything that we are only an equal part of. It's time the fucking relationship changed, Angie, with the country, with other countrymen and women, with other religions, with the animals, with the food, with the money, with the resources. How is our it's getting to a point where, at some stage, things may, if we keep treating the Mother Earth the way that we do, with profit being first from another economy that's come here to our country. That's not our economy. So this economy that I'm sort of getting off the merry-go-round now, saying, well, hang on a second, I'm not going to be spending my time out there trying to make more money to pay more tax. That then takes me away from the most important things in my life, which is my beautiful dream come true, my family. And it's like, we had a beautiful economy here, Ange, and I talk about it like, I don't live in two worlds though, Ange. If I could share a little bit of my story with you, it's about, I used to have that dialogue, but there's only one mother and there's only one father sky. There's only one grandfather sun, grandmother moon. We all, I believe in my own, this is only what my opinion is and what I believe at 41 now, is that they are the all, if you've lost your mother, the human one, well, you've also got mother here forever, Mother Earth. If you lost your father and he's not here no more, Angie, well, you got Father Sky. You can go out there. You always got your father here, and grandfather and grandmother. And I believe that I'm a product of just all their relationships, just like my mother and father and grandmother and grandfather. And this is kind of what I believe. And it doesn't mean that it's now about his culture. I believe in my culture because that's been orally given to me, and I'm continuously learning. And I'm only sort of, I'll probably say, compared to how old my culture is, I'll only ever remain a young fella. But then I also learn from the religious brothers and sisters and what they believe, because it helps me learn more about them. Even knowing that I have my own relationships, and I'm full there, and I want to learn more about my Christian brothers. I want to learn more about my Muslim brothers and sisters and Christian brothers and sisters and Hindu brothers and sisters. I want to learn more because my sons now live amongst them. So I want them to learn more also about us. But then I also love learning about the scientific and the biological stuff too, Angie, about, I'm sort of, I get a bit of an addiction. I've got a couple of addictions I'm trying to sort out, coffee and food, and being a bit lazy and not exercising and training and all these things, and wondering where the hell this is coming from. So I'm learning about our chemicals in our brain. This is one of my last podcasts I did with a cousin, Yamandira. But it's also about being able to, it's about, for me, Angie, this other economy about living by the law of the land that we live, Angie. And not having the human perspective dictate to us how we profit and how we sort of, how do you get more richer, and I'm sitting over here starving, and how do I not eat today? How does that work? And that's probably, I'd probably love this to be our bit of a wrap up, Angie, for you, is with this beautiful, deep spiritual journey that you are on, Sister Ange, as a non-black fella who has got this compassion, who has got this love, who is looking at the right and wrongs that may have happened ancestrally, maybe from your ancestors, maybe from the country where your family first come to Australia.
Yeah.
What does it look like, Angie? This is the this is the $1 million question. If I haven't got my buttons set up yet, but if I'm going to have $1 million question here, I'm going to play the music in the background with Eddie Maguire. And if there's $1 million question, Sister Ange, right? If there's $1 million question, what does it look like when it is fixed with the information and the passion and the journey where you are currently at in our country as a settler and a family member and a beautiful friend of mine and Uncle Greg's that's doing beautiful work and you're working with people at the last stages of their life and helping them transition, helping people living and getting back to being healthy. You're a beautiful performer, and I've seen some of your belly dancing photos too, Angie. Did you do a bit of that stuff too?
Yeah, we did try. Yeah, I did. Yeah.
I seen.
Well, my mum told me that we had Romanian on her side. There's Romanian. I thought, well, no wonder there's a bit of a gypsy in me. I am a bit of a gypsy, I must admit. I thought, oh, there you go. Probably a bit of info there.
But also an entertainer, Ange. You've been entertaining and you share the love, and you've always had that sort of that energy, Ange. And what does it look like from your perspective? This is the $1 million question now. So, Eve, this is probably $1 million question for that I probably want to ask on behalf of my ancestors. No, that's not even nice. It's not on behalf of my ancestors. It's on behalf of my family. It's on behalf of me. And someone who I don't speak for you or your family. I only speak for my own. And I don't speak for any of my nations. I don't speak for anyone outside of my own direct family here that I care for. And also, being the oldest grandson of my grandfather, I'm sort of earning the rightful responsibilities to be able to help my family now that they're not here. What does it look like, Ange? What does it look like on behalf of your side, of your ancestors, if it was to be reconciled? What does it look? We can talk about two things. We can talk about what does the journey look like, because we're currently on that, but what does the destination look like when it may be fixed, Sister Ange?
That's a very very difficult question, and like you, as much as my ancestors, I speak, like you say, not on behalf necessarily of my ancestors, but I guess I speak to what happened. They aren't in a position right now where they can speak. They can't speak for themselves. It's like if there was something legal happening where wrongs had been done, it's the best way to have it is for the two people to be in the room and sit down and yarn about it and go through the smoke. If they come to an agreement about how that can be reconciled, but that can't be done. Those people aren't here to say how they felt or why they did what they did, to express themselves. And so I guess for me, what it would look like ultimately is a function of what I said at the very beginning, which is that we have ceased to pass on the pain of the past to our children's children. That even for either side of the picture or the coin, because it's almost like we're like two sides of the same coin. For both sides of the coin to feel whole and empowered in their life and for their future, and to feel at peace. No matter how I don't know how the country, like I'm not a political person, I don't understand all the things of how that would happen, the ins and outs, but within each and every person, as much as possible in that context, that we have found a peace with one another, that we can be peaceful with one another and cease to almost exist as a function of our skin. I look forward to the day where I even for myself, when I walk into the various rooms that feel confronted by, like, why am I still confronted by my skin? And for both sides of the coin, for that not to be not an issue, to be something that's to be celebrated and not something to denigrate who I am or where I've come from. to the point where, I know a lot of white black fellas. My dear friend, Uncle Alan Phillips, he says he struggles with his journey. He's got a very strong blackfellow line, and yet he's also got Irish line, and his skin color he looks for the most part white. And he says that's also another part of a very difficult journey when you're a white-skinned blackfellow, how difficult that is. And so I look forward to the days where a little white girl who is not from sixth generation, she wasn't there, she could never have been a part of it, to be immediately, because of her skin color, to be labelled as, or to be treated any differently. And on the other side of the coin, for all people, particularly Aboriginal, regional people of this country, to finally be fully and totally acknowledged for the fact that they most, from what I understand, could be the oldest culture on the planet. There is a treasure in this country and the people that hold that seed, that the treasure box that we have not even been given permission to open yet. But I think we're getting there, and we're finding our way to gain trust. It's like building a relationship again, where we feel we can trust one another with one another. And however that looks, and I think a community that feels we can trust each other with our hearts and with our deepest thing, which could be culture, or because it was destroyed.
Yeah.
So if your next door neighbour destroys something you own, then you don't want to share with them anymore.
Yeah.
But the thing to remember, it's like we're all learning, and certainly that would be, for me, be my greatest legacy, is to know that in generations to come from here, that maybe people who have read my story and can see that, for me, so that people know, like, part of my story is holding the Crown to account. I hold her account as on a spiritual level. My journey has been spiritual. My essence and my journey is, I don't know much about how it's going to manifest physically in the world, but my journey is spiritual, and my letters to her and conversations with her have been around being held to account and taking whatever responsibility she can also for, because she also wasn't the person that created the exact atrocities at that time, but maybe at in the effect, or at this time, still certain things happening that are continuing certain levels of the pain.
But just to jump in there, and it actually was
because of go ahead.
It was her third great grandfather who actually made the decisions to send Lieutenant Cook
that's
out.
Right, and which is
her ancestor. Which is like, so what we're doing right now as human beings, as equal to this planet Earth and Mother Earth, as each other. It is one of her grandfathers that made this decision, and and I think that's kind of that's the journey. Hey, Angie, that's the journey about how do we. It's okay to be able to have a position of influence and be in the, but when you think of, Harry, there's no longer Prince Harry, he's just Harry now. Yeah. And that's a beautiful sign that there's beautiful times that are changing, and it's now not about sort of positions of power no more, and it's not about knowledge is power no more, and for me it's kind of more about knowledge is understanding. I want my son to know what is that coloured dot on that boy's head, or that girl's, or what is that thing on that boy's head that he goes to school with, or what is that food in that friends of his, what do they eat, or what is that word that he just said to greet him? I want my sons to learn more about who they're growing up with,
one another,
right. and I think that's the beautiful part, Ange, that the conversations like this, and I'm so glad that my mainstream community that that follow me or that watch any of this stuff get to see a beautiful other human being like yourself who happens to not be a black fella, that, you know, actually happens to be someone who's going, hang on a second, there's been some wrong done here, and I don't want to be passing that on either. It's a bit like me and some of the traumas that my family have survived, and I'm sort of saying I'm not passing those traumas on. I'm not passing those life skills on no more, because it's the Ange, I'm going to say it like this, is fucking dying with me. My sons are not going to, and I know that it works like this, Ange. If we commit to it,
well said.
If we commit to this, Ange, like, for example, for me, I don't have this drug and alcohol problem that my mother and father had, because my father tackled, with learning from his father, addiction to drugs and addictions to, you know, to things that they become slaves to their weaknesses about. So I'm sort of I honour my grandfather, Jimmy Ryan, for bringing that into our family's, you know, paternal line, who then brought my father into it, who then Dad brought me into it to teach me. And it's a bit, Ange, like, it's a bit, if people can't understand what your journey is around the spiritual healing, the spiritual one.
Yeah.
I'm probably in my own way now trying to relate to that in my own words, that, you know, I don't have this vulture that's craving drugs and alcohol no more, Ange. My father and my mother were very, very, you know, caught up in their lifestyle, and I come from their DNA. But my father's father, he was also, you know, he tackled this, Ange. He tackled it, so that when he then spent time with his son and got connected, there was this is the spiritual realm, or the spiritual transactions that are happening by the way we live our lives, that then get passed on, that then kind of it's kind of me just sharing my kind of on the run thoughts around what does it look like when we're dealing with our own lineage around, you know, around this stuff. And I sort of look at my own son, Ange. I look at my own 21-year-old son, who I'm very proud of, Aiden, how he lives his life. And, you know, there's almost some of the trauma that I was born and raised with, I can see is kind of, it's not there in Aiden, and it's kind of not, don't get me wrong, I'm sure he's got his own challenges like we all do in life, and he's becoming a young man now, and I'm very proud of him. But there's also stuff there that I think there's probably balanced more up now of the intergenerational magic rather than just the intergenerational trauma stuff. So there's kind of this transaction. So I just think that, Ange, what you've done today, being here with me, what you've done with your book, what you're doing every day when you talk about this stuff, because you live and breathe it too, it's kind of the main reason why I wanted to invite you into my life. And, you know, I'm so glad that we met, you know, at Uncle Greg's bedside when he was healing from the physical world, you know, and maybe spiritual world.
I agree. I agree. I'm super grateful for that, which I don't know, I tend to think, you know, with all the hundreds and hundreds of synchronicities that have happened to me, that you were just part of that web, definitely, even to this moment of time, giving people an opportunity to maybe connect with the story and make some difference, maybe. You know, that's my only hope, that it might make some difference. And, you know, to pull a thread through as we finish with the book, and people might wonder why there's this big gosh darn stag on there, which when people say, well, what's that got to, I had one person, an older person, say, oh, is your book about hunting stags? I used to, no stag. But stag is actually a very, for people who were, I suppose you could say, English, British, Saxon, right back to those, the spiritual days of the Arthurian legends, stag, or particularly white stag was an extremely important sign of change, a very, very spiritual sign. And if people were to see one in the forest, it was seen as an extremely fortuitous and highly spiritual moment to possibly even question your life, or you know, to sit down in circle and with elders, or whatever culture or whatever tribal issue it was within that time. So stag is something that you'll see as you read the book. It comes into play a bit later, as it's almost like this this symbol and this sign for people of those bloodlines that came from those ships, from those places that come from basically the lands or the country of the Standing Stones, the myths of Excalibur, the myths of King Arthur and what he he at that time stood for around creating a place called Albion, which you'll get introduced to in the book. A lot of people don't know that when you know, the first fleeters and whatnot came here, our first governor, Arthur Phillip, originally called Sydney Albion. But it didn't get there. It ended up being his friend Lord Mayor Sydney, and so Sydney, which was obviously called something completely different prior to that. I'm here to acknowledge that. It's not its actual first name, but Albion was the name. And you'll see in the book where this thread of Albion and what Albion actually is, what people stood for around the myths and legends around Albion as this place of peace, this place where all men and women could come together, no matter, you know, where you were from or what you're about. There could be peace, which was what ultimately the myths and legends around Arthur, who was said to be the once a future king, he would return again when Albion needs him most. And to me, I think as a people, as my bloodlines, I believe we are at that time. And Albion isn't actually a place. It's way more than a place. But I wanted to say something that was in the last letter as we finish up. The last letter is full with so much information, and he does my own head in, which came down to me almost like a download in the last days of putting the book together. And this is when people say, "What are you asking of the Queen? What have you requested, or what have you spoken to her?" And this is basically it. So on the 2nd day of June in 1953, at the Abbey Church of St. Peter, Westminster, she was coronated. And she was coronated and bestowed with sacred swords. I go into more of what those swords were, and it's very, very significant. So when we talk about culture and symbols as a part of that bloodline, these are the symbols that speak to I suppose, if you wanted to say white fellas or people of that British Saxon heritage, this is what is in their bone, the bloodline of these symbols, right? So she went through under God. People can think, you know, Great Spirit or Father Sky or whatever it is, but for her culture at that time, it was under God. So she made oaths, and this oath was said under these swords, right? So it was, "Hear our prayers, O Lord, we beseech thee. So direct and support thy servant, Queen Elizabeth, that she may not bear the sword in vain." Now, the sword, Excalibur, was the sword of sovereignty. What is the one thing that people in this country, First Nations people in particular, have, you know, the thing that they've been fighting for all this time is their sovereignty, which was never ceded. But it's the understanding that it is plain sight and agreed upon as an entire nation. That she may not bear the sword in vain, that she may use it as the minister of God for the terror and punishment of evil, for the protection and encouragement of those who do well. Then they offer this sword, which is, I'll go into what those swords are, it's not the time here, but they offer this sword to her, and as she holds it, the Archbishop says, "Receive this kingly sword, bought now from the altar of God, and delivered to you by the hands of us, the bishops and servants of God, though unworthy. With this sword do justice." So the thing that when you read the entire letter, this was sent to her, she made this oath unto God. "With this sword do justice, stop the growth of iniquity, protect the Holy Church, help and defend the widows and orphans, restore the things that have gone to decay, maintain the things that have to be restored, punish and reform what is amiss, and confirm what is in good order." Right? So part of what the oath I have hit her with is there are things that have been amiss, there are things that are in disorder, and you made an oath unto God on this sword to do your job. And basically, I didn't say it, I said in a much better way than this, but basically, it is time before you leave this earth to complete on the oaths that you made and restore what needs to be restored here.
Wow.
That is in a nutshell. I hit her with an oath to God, not to Parliament or to man.
Not the blackfellas in Australia, not just what where she made her commitment.
No.
It is now time to fix what they have done.
What is right? She made an oath to be that and do that.
Yep.
And at this stage, she hasn't.
Yep.
So the letters that I received back from her originally, before this letter, that I haven't had a response from this letter. It only went not very long ago, and everything going on in the world, you can understand why it's taking a bit longer to hear from her. And the original letter that I sent. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that, with the passing of her husband and with all this there's pedophilia stuff that's coming out, and they would be so much that they're kind of crumbling from within because there's big shifts happening.
Of course. That's right. And so that's where this letter, which came to her, really, I don't even feel like it's not me. I couldn't have come up with half this. I couldn't have made it up. I would never clue about this stuff. It came to me. And then the day when the Duke died, they said, now, you send this letter to her now. I don't know what influence he had. You know what I mean? And I sat down, and then I had to find out because I'm looking at this ceremony and those oaths and other journeys I've had with Excalibur. But then when I looked into the swords that were handed to her, one was called the Yoisu and the other one was called the Durandal. And there's all this history and symbolism that go right back to what is the sword in the stone? The story of Excalibur, the sword in the stone. The sword is truth. The sword is sovereignty. The sword is truth, basically, the stone. And it goes right back to this piece of metal that was said to come from the actual sword that pierced Christ. Like this stuff, like people say, oh, but it's only no. These people understand ceremony and ritual, and you made oaths unto God, holding something that was said to fabled to go through the hands of like the Arthurian legends right back to Christ. This is heavy. And if you don't fix I don't necessarily think there's a hell. I don't know because I can't remember or I can't prove that. But I do believe that there comes a time when we pass that we will have to face our life.
Yeah.
And this coming together, whether she acts on it or she doesn't, at least I've done my job in this life, and that is to remind her of her oath unto God, because woe betide if we, you know what I mean? There are repercussions.
Yep.
There are repercussions when whatever culture you live by, whatever spiritual, we all know that it's so. It'll be interesting.
A man that's seen more sunrises than anyone that I know, is Uncle Wes, and I remember him teaching me one of them lessons of life. He's 25 years ago now. I remember him saying after we're having a yarn about you don't need university degrees to know the difference between right and wrong.
That's exactly right. And for her too, like at the end of the day, I do believe there is a level of not forgetting, but forgiveness. And that takes restoring integrity. So for her to restore the integrity of the crown so that her grandsons who actually I think are most probably much better leaders and with a lot different hearts due to their mother. But for her to restore, she needs to restore what is broken so that they can stand in integrity. Or, as we know, anything that's not in its integrity right now, it will crumble down. So to me, I've offered it to her as an opportunity to also find that there has to be the ceasing of the blame the blame and the shame, and it goes on and on and on and on. It's a part of history, but it's like they need to restore that. And even though there has been a level of sorry here, but it's not been restored on a high spiritual level from the crown down.
I've seen and she's got back to you 3 times. Hey, Ange, they've got back to you 3 times now.
Yeah. And so what she said, I haven't heard from her around this one. This one was particularly powerful, but one of the letters was talking about that restoration in a different way, and whether she would take part in that. And the letter I had come back from her, which I think, to me, the way I read it was that she would. Yep. So, I mean, I'm paraphrasing right now, but basically it said that as sovereign, she cannot intervene.
Yep. And goes through the Governor General here, doesn't it? He runs the affairs here.
And she says, I have to go to the Governor General and or the Prime Minister, who Scott Morrison's people came off the same boat mine did, the Scarborough. Yep. So I did.
And that's what I can say to Scotty Morrison. Scotty Morrison, it's time to heal the scars, bro.
It is.
You get it? And you never laughed at my jokes. There's a joke there, Ange. Scarborough, that's the name of the boat. We say.
Oh, sorry, I didn't get that one.
See, you're on your mission there. Oh, hang on. There it is. Thank you very much. There is my round of applause I was waiting for. So thank you very much.
That's good. That's good. I'm going to put that one in my mind. Same boat. So I did. I even went to the Governor General's house, and this Governor General we currently have, I must admit I'm a bit disappointed because he actually, in his address when he was sworn in, spoke in Aboriginal language of the Canberra people of that area. Yeah. And I thought, my God, this could be our in. This guy really gets it. And he said that two of his great passions for his appointment was to work around restoring Indigenous blah, blah. And, I hand delivered packets of information, the letters, and basically letters from the Queen saying for me to take this information to them because basically from what I understood from her was that she couldn't act without being requested or asked by them. Yep. So she sent me to them. So in my understanding, she could have just said, thanks for your letter, not interested. Yep. She said, go to these
or just
people.
Not reply at all.
Exactly. But she replied 3 times. And even one time when my father passed away, showed her great compassion for the death of my father. So she's replied and kept telling me to go to them, and they have ignored me, even twice the Governor General. So that's why in the book in itself, I realised that saying that you said about, we can't have a circle just standing on our own. Yeah. And I came to a point where I delivered the letters. I'm doing everything I can to fulfil on her being requested to take part in this interaction in some way. Yeah. And they weren't listening. And I thought, well, I can't do this on my own. And so that, in a sense, is why the book, in some ways, the story, and this is like seriously a scratching of the whole story. I had so much, just couldn't go in because it was too hot. Yeah. But my hope is that people read and get inspired. I was one letter. Yep. I was one letter, but my dream is to have 1 million letters from 1 million descendants. Yep. Convict or otherwise, to stand together. I would love to have a name from every ancestor of every convict from every ship. Can you imagine? Like, my convict, and having these letters of we stand for this. We stand for this as a people to release this and finally heal this. Imagine that. Yeah. And so my dream is that the greatest story ever told would be that this uprising of the people, not from blame or shame or trying to make people wrong but just to stand together and say, it's time. And we want to release our ancestry from this pain and our future generations from the suffering that in the wake of it. And so 1 million letters from 1 million people, and I deliver that to the Governor General's doorstep and say, now contact time is running out. Yep.
Love it, Ange.
Now request this of the, So that's.
Love it, Ange.
I'll finish off with one last thing. Yeah. One last thing, which was something that you would hear Uncle Greg say all the time.
Hang on a second. Hang on, Angie. Let me just set this magic moment up for you because, I always sort of said too, just before you go into this, Ange, it's, this is for you to get the invite from me to come and spend time with my family, and for me to give my time to you away from my family, is because of who you are, not because you're an author, not because you're a kinesiologist, just because of I feel you. I feel your sister, and this is this is an ongoing walk and an ongoing relationship, and it's not for everybody. There's a tough walk ahead, and even on behalf of my family, there's some tough conversations, and but I wanted to say, big thank you. I'm not here to promote your book. The book actually comes with you, Ange, and the book has got things in it. So it's this is not a book launch. This is not me giving. This is about me and you, Ange. The book actually happens to come with you, just like your iPhone does, where it's got all the photos of your family. It's just another thing. So I wanted to say that this is more important. You are more important to me than the book, Ange, and the book happens to actually come with you.
Thank you.
And for me to be able to get people in on, I guess, Ange. Actually, this one probably needs one of these moments for me. Everyone at home, the opportunity for me to talk about Ange and her book with you today is maybe I've been told sometimes what I do in my walk is that it's a chance for me to walk into the dark and grab people's hands and then be able to lead them out of the dark and maybe turn the light on for them to be able to help them get it. And I'm so glad that Ange actually gets it, everyone. She's at a stage where, whether it was through her own traumas that you'll read in the book that she grew up with, and I read some of them too, Ange, and you've told me some of them too, but there's some of these moments in life that help people go, fuck, I get it now. I've got some other people and politicians and friends and other people of mine, other cultures, nationalities, religions and scientists or whatever, say, Joe, I get it now. Like, I understand it now. And this book is another opportunity for me to say, if you are looking at trying to understand more outside of than just your own understandings that we can sometimes be limited by, Sister Ange is someone in my life that I'm motivated by to learn about what she's doing as a mainstream Australian without blackfella blood, to then have now also got a book that other people can, get some awareness from a non-blackfellas perspective. And this is what I wanted to share with everyone, Ange, so that maybe people can, maybe people can just have that beautiful kind of understanding of what it actually looks like as an Australian who does want to say, well, actually, I don't know nothing about my second great-grandfather or grandmother. I don't know nothing about it. And then next minute, when we do find out all this stuff, and I found this on my own journey, Ange, that, we find out some of the most beautiful and most healing things, but then we also find out some of the most horrific stuff. And we find out things that we're not looking for, that we didn't want to find also. And that creates another whole process of the Sciberras. Let's call it the Sciberras, That's the Sciberras. And then we have to heal the Sciberras. And that's from that ship. Also, that's the name of the ship. So, I want to put that little sort of disclaimer, Ange, too, out there, just to let people know this is not a promotion of your book, sister. The book actually happens to come with you, and we'd be doing this whether you had a book or not, and...
thank you. I appreciate that. And really, at the end of the day, I think the book, because it is such for me, trying to even explain, people are probably thinking even on today, I don't really even get what the book's about still. Even I still have days where I don't get what the book's about because I'm trying to interpret what's coming to me all the time. But it was a really good way to not make money, because that's certainly not what is happening.
It probably cost you more money than you'll make,
I knew how. Sorry?
It'll cost you more. It's probably cost you more money and time to then, to get it done.
I can't tell you. 30, 40 grand probably by the time, just the whole journey from start to finish. And I had a publisher at one point and who was behind me. And then as time went on, they felt that the topic was because of the way the world was and all the George Floyd stuff happened. And here I am, this white woman writing a book about my ancestry, and they just felt that it was too hot for them, and so they dropped me, and that was very difficult. So I had to push through and decide, well, do I keep going and doing this on my own? It had already cost me a lot. I'd lost a lot of money in that process, and so I thought, well, the synchronicities kept coming, so I felt that life, spirit, my ancestors, whatever, the old people were saying, keep going. So I kept going, and I did it myself in the end. Got it all over the line. So it hasn't been an easy journey. And in the middle of all that, my father had cancer and passed away. And so that was very difficult. But in some ways, he became, I see the perfection of him then becoming someone who guided me and helped me. And I felt him more in my life in some ways since he's passed than when he was actually here. He was so present in every way after he passed away. So as much as I missed him just horribly, we were very close. I also understand that he's continued to play a role and continued to walk with me through this journey. It's not, some people have said to me, oh, well, you know, are you trying to tell the Aboriginal story, or are you trying to tell the original people's story? Like, that's not actually what I'm doing. The book is actually just my story, and it just so happens that my ancestry and my history coincides with the story of the First Nations Aboriginal people of this country. So, and so for those who are thinking, oh, you know, how could I can't speak to it. It's certainly not my area of expertise, although certain pieces of information or learnings have come, and I've done my absolute best to learn as much as I can, whether it be Uncle Wes or Uncle Greg or various aunties and uncles, and yourself, Uncle Alan Phillips, who, just a side note, has got I think it's just been made a charity, One Mob Dreaming, which is his dreaming around bringing people together. So that's also something you can find online, onemobdreaming.com, or look up Alan Phillips. He's a part of that, and he's been extremely helpful as well. So, but again, I just want to acknowledge all the people that have assisted me and helped me, including all the uncles and aunties and country that have assisted me as I've started to learn and grow and understand and create more understanding, and hopefully pass that my own aha moments and revelations in my own mind onto other people, so that they may have a change of heart. Because it's like the moment we have a change of heart, then anything's possible. When the walls come down and we can start to see possibility of relationship, and then reconciliation can mean something and not just be a word or an action to do. And something that I think about a lot is Uncle Greg says this at the welcomes, and he says, Aboriginal people are the greatest counsellors and psychologists the world has ever known, greatest conservationists, world's greatest scientists and astronomers. That's the Aboriginal people. As we take our next step, let us remember the ones that walked this sacred land before. We have over 500 dialects in this country. In New South Wales, there are over 136. So this must have been a multicultural country before settlers came here in 1788 and the ones that followed. And in saying this, we are all Australians, as we are Aboriginal elders. As we as Aboriginal elders don't exclude people from the circle. We love people to come and share their values and stories. We learn from our old people, from our stories, songs and dance that belong to all people, not just Aboriginal people. We will never have knowledge if we don't do this. Once we start learning from each other, then we are heading in the right direction towards reconciliation. Don't you think the music would sound so much better if we use both the black and white keys? So I feel like that's...
Love it, Ange.
I think that's a perfect place to finish, and he inspires me with that every day. So thank you, Jai. You're an exceptional young man, and I appreciate your time and energy.
Ange, and thank you for sharing. As I say, your most valuable asset, I believe, in this world is your time and your love. Thank you very much for giving some of that to me too, Ange, because, you know, where we need to go, I believe, in our country, it's going to take the right people at the right time to be able to, work through our differences and work through our teachings and grow more of a greater understanding And I'm sort of glad that I'm on a bit of a journey myself, Ange, and learning more about myself as an individual and as a black fella and as a white fella and as a male and as a human and as a as a life form itself amongst that's only equal to the trees and the country and the animals and everyone else. So it's kind of a beautiful time, Ange, and I want to say a big thank you for sharing your story, Ange, and thank you for walking and working with me on stuff and getting through stuff and getting to the other end of stuff, because it's not always going to be a beautiful dance together, Ange, on this stuff, because it's not built. The dance floor's not built for everyone, but we get through wrestles on things, I believe, in life to get through to the beautiful dance again, and that really builds relationships and that really shows the real relationships, not just relationships or partnerships, but real relationships. Right. And I think that it's a beautiful way to finish, but it's also there's one more thing that I love to do when we finish our yarns, Angie, and for people, there's two things. Well, there's always one more thing with Ginormous, but there's two things. One, if people want to get the book, Angie, how do they get a hold of you? Do you want to?
The easiest way is you can go to any of the online bookstores, the Barnes and Nobles and all those places. If you wish to you can get the ebook. That might be for people who are into that sort of stuff.
Yep.
You can also go to my website, which is www.newrealms.
Yep.
So New Realms with a Z.com.
Yep.
And why New Realms is because the Queen and all of that, she's Queen of all realms, and I think it's time for New Realms.
Beautiful.
So newrealms.com. And there's a thing there where you can order a book. I can send you a signed copy if you want it, if people are into that. Some people are. But certainly any of the online stores, you can get the physical copy or the ebook for sure.
Maybe, Ange, you could even comment some stuff in our comments and put some just put your website and stuff in there.
Absolutely.
Because this is a very sensitive topic, I'll always say, if you're going to share the love, people out there, and you got some, if you've seen this and if it is something that you support, well, then we would love to hear and see your love and support. Yes. But if it's something that you don't support, well, then please keep your comments to yourself, because this is a very private conversation made public, and I just ask for you to scroll on and find someone else's page. But this is a very specific topic for us, and I'll be making sure that we kind of, out of respect for you, Ange, and your family, and I'll be making sure that that's all protected, and on behalf of our old people, making sure that you are also, because you are part of Uncle Greg and Uncle Wes, and some of our other elders have welcomed you into their families, and I've done the same thing, Ange, and I give you that blessing. So Uncle Wes has taught us that when you bring someone into the camp, you then protect them and you look after them, you fight for them like you fight for your own, and that's how it was in the old days, and we had to look after those that we welcomed in. So thank you very much, Ange. But there is one song that that I asked for you, and I asked for all my guests to share with us. And I didn't get around to it with my cousin brother last episode, but you've given me a song, and I've got it here ready to go. I don't want you to tell us the name of it. I just want you to tell us the story, and I'm going to put it on. Tell us tell us why when we hear this song, why whenever we come across this song, why when people go and search for this song, why is this song a song for Angie that's going to make us think of you, Sister Ange?
Yeah, this song was actually sent to me via somebody who'd heard me speak, because I do also speak. I give talks about various things. She'd heard me speak about the book or about the story, and she had heard the song. I'd never heard of the artist or the song, and she said, "Oh, I just heard this and thought this feels like exactly what you're trying to say." It kind of spoke to a conversation I once had with Uncle Wes, when I said to him, we'd done a smoking ceremony, and he talked a little bit about what happens when, there might have been something go wrong, or, the smoking spirit walking through the smoke, and reconciling with people after walking through the smoke. And, pretty well the conversation, I won't speak on his behalf, but my understanding of it was that once you walked on the other side of the smoke, that the issue was never to be spoken of again. It was once it was, that you'd made your peace, you'd had your conversation, everyone had whatever. And I sat with that, and I said to him, do you know, I'd walked through the smoke so many times, and I just still don't feel like it's enough. How many more times do I have to feel like I need to walk through the smoke, where I don't have to keep talking about this? Like, I still feel this thing in me, even though I wasn't here. What's that about? And he goes, you and I have spoken about it. You and I have walked through the smoke, and Ange, you don't have to keep bringing this up with me. It's done now. And I thought, that's what this song reminded me of.
Beautiful.
Is that whatever side of the coin, it's just like, how many times, the one thing I hope that we can find is balance, that we can heal this, but then not feel tempted to then the pendulum to swing the other way, and then the other side of the coin that wasn't even here be punished for things that weren't even, it's like this coin we can't seem to stop flipping. So, so that's when this person sent me this song just after I'd had that experience. I thought, that's what it feels like.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's time, Ange. I've got to go to the Jillawa, sister. I've got to go to the toilet. I need to have some tucker. I've been doing a bit of exercise, and it's been a beautiful time, Ange. And I guess the beautiful thing, we've probably been, what's that? Maybe like a bit over 2.5 hours, Angie.
Wow. If someone listened to this whole thing, man, they've got nothing to do.
Yeah. Or they've got,
a lot of people with nothing
or
to do
they're looking for the right thing to do next.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and you know what? There's so much more to say. So if people are interested, we can chat again in more depth in certain things later.
Beautiful, Ange. Well, I want to say a big thank you. Everybody at home, can we give Ange a big round of applause and thank her for sharing her most valuablest asset and time with us, her dreaming. And now let's make some more noise, everybody. Let's make some noise. Yeah, pump that up. That's what we're talking about.
I need one of those.
I'm going to say thank you again, Ange. Thank you again. And I look forward to having a yarn with you after this. And it's a beautiful day out there at the moment. So I'm going to go and spend some of that with my family and be a bit of a homeschool daddy-o, and maybe throw some weights around and go and get a bit of exercise done. So again, Ange, on behalf of my family and on behalf of my ancestors to yours, I want to say thank you for your walk and thank you for being you. And everyone, again, can you please make some noise for the one and only Angie?
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching and listening. Thank you so much. Beautiful.
Yano, Ange. That comes to the end of a beautiful big yarn, very, very deep yarn around unresolved business in our family bloodlines, on our beautiful country, with all beautiful people today that come from maybe some people that made some very, very bad decisions and followed up with some very bad actions from a long time ago. And as I say, I don't know all the answers to the problems. I know a lot of the problems, but I'm definitely going to be part of the solutions. And on behalf of my family line that I'm from, I want to say a big thank you for those that have tuned in and had a look. And also want to say to my family members and to my extended family and to friends out there, we all play a role whilst our flames are being lit, and at some stage that may be taken away from us. So love the ones that are in your life and lead with love and rise above, because I always like to share that what I talk about is only my opinion. It's only my track record from walk. It's only my record of my time here on our beautiful Mother Earth. And what I talk about, I'm just one man from the land and one bloke with one vote. And from up there, from our ancestors' point of view, or from the Creator's point of view, looking down here, there is kind of only one mother that has birthed all of us and all life forms. And that's why I talk about one race, and I talk about one place looking down here. So in my little sign-off, people, remember that message. It's you've been with the Living Truth with Ginormous Pip and Uncle Jajai. And remember my little sign-off, people, one race, and it's one place, and it's peace out with love.
Yeah, one race, one place. It's like that, y'all. One race, one place. It's like that. One race, one place. Yeah, that's a fact. One race, one place.